Ready? Cool. I'm just refresh it so that. Are your new slides in? Can you tell? Scroll down. That's it. Other. All right, everybody. This is Inquiry Events, and this is our last time slot before that informal kind of Q&A end session. So welcome. We'll be talking about like picture this, science word, write and do it, really whatever we have time for. The inquiry events are kind of like that extra category that's besides life science, earth sciences, and chemistry, etc. So your speakers are me, Ashish, I'm president.
Everyone, I'm Aditya, I'm the tournament director for EK Science Olympiads.
Cool. You wanna go ahead?
Yeah, so we'll start out by talking about the first class of events, which is science word picture this. Consider science word is in division C and picture this is in division B, but we're lumping them together because the events are very similar in how you approach them and how you practice them. So the general premise behind these two events is that you have a team of people. And in picture this, one person draws something and the other person has to guess which science word they're drawing. And in science word, it's like playing the game Taboo, except it's all about science words. So I could say something like planetary body, and somebody could say like Mars. I don't know. So that's how these two events work. So the general idea behind these two things is whoever you're partnered up with, all you have to do is practice as much as you can. And every partnership is going to have something different that works between them. For Ashish and I, we focus a lot on having like very precise scientific definitions and practicing a lot on like having a system. But I know other teams like the same way that Ashish and I did it, Clemens also did science wording. They had a very complicated system that revolved around memes, and it worked exceptionally well for them. So just whatever works for a unit of formation. But the main key is to just practice as much as you possibly can. So how do you actually practice for an event like science wording issues? Well, it's exactly how you would expect. You just have somebody give you a list of like 25 words or 40 words or what any amount of words, and then you just practice with your partner. So you can get these word lists from online resources like Cycly.org. There's also this website over here. We're going to send this link out in like a resource document to all the people who attended the coaches clinic afterwards, so you don't have to worry about trying to copy that. But that's a link where it's pretty much a website that allows you to play like picture this as science word in real time. So it has a timer built in. It counts how many words you get right or wrong and pass and all that stuff. And it also gives you the option to choose some difficulty levels. So you can be like, I only want easy words, I only want hard words, stuff like that. And you can also come up with your own list. You can just have a friend, write down 25 words, stuff like that. Ashish and I, in our physics 2 class in our senior year, we would just have our friends write down random words, and then we would do it during physics 2. So you can literally do whatever you want. Another useful resource for coming up with a list of words is looking at the back of textbook glossaries. Um, in particular, like, middle school science textbooks are especially useful for these types of events, trying to come up with the right words. Because they're not too specific and not too niche, but they still cover a really broad range of material that is exactly perfect for events like Picture This in Science. And if you really want to try and get into like the nitty gritty of some of these subjects, you can definitely look at more specialized textbooks like Campbell's Biology or a physics textbook if you want some like higher level words. Now, all this practicing is useful and effective, but it becomes really, really awesome when you actually make it part of a larger system and you keep track of what you're practicing and you really focus on where your strengths are and reinforcing your weaknesses. So what Ashish and I would do is whenever we practice, we would keep a list of every single word that we practice. And then we say, okay, if the word that we want to guess is refraction, then we should say light bending. And we would keep this giant spreadsheet of it so that if we were ever practicing and you're like, this word has come up before, but I forgot what we said last time, we can just pull this up, control F refraction, and then see light bending. And that way we can keep our practicing consistent. We can also reinforce what we did before, so that we're building off of what we did in the past instead of reinventing the wheel every single time. Now, you can do the same thing for picture this. So back when I was in ninth grade, I did picture this professionally when it was a national event. And what we did is we had a bunch of papers, and we would have a symbol like this, and then we would just write down a bunch of words that were associated. So like for this thing, we have like some DNA strand with a circle around it. So as soon as somebody starts drawing that thing, as the person who's guessing, you just start saying random words like heredity, genetics, allele, mutation, whatever, right? You just say whatever comes into your head as fast as you can, because there's no penalty for guessing. And then we have pages and pages and pages of these like things that we all have to find body because we practice so much. And this was kind of like an encyclopedia for us. So every time we had a question, we just flip through a little binder or folder, come back to this, and we're like, oh, okay, elevation, that's what we should draw. So keeping this type of log really helped us stay organized and made us a much more efficient team in terms of practicing. Because it's good to work hard, but you should also work smart. Your time is valuable and you shouldn't waste it. Now I'm just going to touch up on a little bit of like more specific tips because in the previous slide I was being a little general. So these tips are more focused on Division B because I know we have a lot of Division B teams here. So you guys can definitely read this, but I'll elaborate on it a little bit more. So since there's no penalty for guessing, one really good strategy of picture this is to have general symbols and then just have people guess extremely fast. Like my partners and I would actually practice guessing as fast as we could and coming up with random words, even when we couldn't think of anything more. Because it's better to guess random stuff than to just stay silent. So you can see like with this one, just by drawing those 3 lines, we're supposed to guess all of this plus anything else we think of, as long as it's vaguely related to an experiment. And the thing is, like those three lines, it doesn't really mean anything if you just leave them out of context. But for us, we gave it a very specific meaning, which is why we were able to have this. Now, you can also break up complex words into simpler words. This is something that applies. You have a question? Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm not in this event, but what if you and your partner made like a hand language or something? Is that uh, a hand language? So I think odds are you would probably get exposed if you were doing something with your hands, uh, and that would you would get disqualified for cheating. And even if you were able to like even conceal, I don't know, you have a jacket or something that hides it, you sit in an angle where the partner can't see it. I think it would still be slower than trying to do it this way, like a legitimate way. But what if you like? Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. So I believe in the rules that you're allowed to say stuff like go on or stop, but that's all you're allowed to do. And during actual competition, when you're under that type of time pressure, you as the competitor, you actually don't feel like you have that much time to do anything else. You just like keep going, keep guessing, that type of thing. It's a very like hectic environment. Um, like back when Shisha were doing it, it was like almost instantly you could be like saying words nonstop. It's a very stressful type of thing. Does that answer your question? Okay, awesome, no problem. So yeah, and then another core idea to and then like picture this in science was to break up complex words into simpler ideas. So let's say that I have the word surface tension. If I actually wanted to draw a very scientific diagram for surface tension, I would have like some sort of curve and then I'd have the molecules, maybe I would draw arrows to show like the forces on them and stuff. That would take me a lot of time and there's no guarantee that they would even get the word. So I can split it up into two really easy things. Surface and tension, which are easy for me to draw and easy for them to guess. For surface, I draw a cube and I shade the top face. For tension, I draw a bar that's getting stretched. That takes me about a second to draw, and it's instantaneous for them to guess. Also, okay, and then I'll just kind of combine these two things. So we made our own special symbols to picture this and gave them meaning. So whenever we draw like something and then we put a circle around it, that means study up. So here you see like a DNA strand with a circle around it. That means study of DNA, study of genetics, that's heredity, stuff like that. And then next to the dinosaur you see like this arrow pointing inwards. That means I have a dinosaur, but that arrow pointing inwards means I want a specific dinosaur. So I start guessing stuff like Stegosaurus or Tyrannosaurus Rex or Triceratops. And another thing we have is like, let's say that I had, like, let's say I drew pressure, and then if I drew a certain, like, type of box or line around it, then that meant I want a device that measures what's inside of it. So I'd be like, oh, a manometer or a barometer measures pressure. So that's how I know, well, I'm not just looking for pressure, I'm looking for something that measures pressure. And that way you can add a lot of complexities and nuances to like picture this as science word language. That would be really hard to convey otherwise. And the last kind of piece of advice I have is to keep all your clues and drawings really simple, whether it's a picture this or a science. The science word, when Ashish and I were doing it, we realized that there was no limit on how many clues that they would give, as long as there were guesses in between. So we were thinking, what if you literally just started like reciting the dictionary definition, and then you just had the person throwing in like BS guesses in between, right? Because then you can pretty much state the entire definition, just broken up in chunks, and guaranteed to get the word. But then we actually tried that out, and we realized it was so slow and so clunky that it was just way better to actually practice and get really good at doing simple, fast, and effective things. That's the way to become good at us, and about like science or revision is. Keep everything simple and keep everything fast.
Cool. So for Write and Do It, just in the interest of time, we're going to, wow, it's raining again. We're going to do like, we're just going to go into the actual tips for Write and Do It. And they include just obviously to practice a lot. I did Write and Do It for 5 years. And it started out and ended in practicing a lot. So as I was a writer, 3 years Aditya and I did it together. And he was, yeah, so that's right, we did all the inquiry events together. So I was the writer, he was the builder, and as a writer, I always found it was way more important to be concise. It saves your builder time because they don't have to read through it a lot, and it saves you time because you can write faster and kind of get to the point. And so use a system to help do directions. And we use the clock and plane system. I'm actually going to go into this a lot more than I did in previous years because I think it's really interesting and a really good strategy. We use the clock and plane system for directions and our own measurement system where at the end I would just be like, okay, your third joint of your pinky is kind of as long as my third joint. So let's call that an inch, and then we can say like, oh, 5 inches away to that direction, put down the pipe cleaner. So easy stuff like that. Recaps, sometimes, yeah, you can recap sections to help the doer know if they messed up. So as writer, I might be like, okay, you got done with this, it should look like a fish. It should look like kind of a helmet. And the doer's like, okay, I have no idea what that means. Let me just read it one more time to make sure that I actually built this right. And also, we almost came up with like our own language to detail the parts of a paperclip, binder clip, and Legos. Like a paperclip might have the large curve and the small curve. It might have the large end, the small end, etc. And that just helps your doer kind of orient how they slide on a paperclip or how they clip on a binder clip. And then with commercial sets, like Legos and stuff, because they cost money, they actually don't tend to be used in Write It Do It that much. People don't have the money to buy a bunch of Legos for every single one of the competitors and a bunch of Kinects. So although it says that in the rules, your best bet is to practice first with the most common materials, which are like the styrofoam bases, the pipe cleaners, the styrofoam balls, the paper clips, binder clips, stationery, office stuff. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Okay. So for what is graded in Write It Do It is usually just connections. So they want to see like, oh, is the um, 1 point, is the pipe cleaner stabbed into the base? Yes. Is it stabbed in but pointing in that direction? 2 points, right? And then the third point might be, is it like spiraled in the correct way? And is it correct relative to this other part of the structure? So location is graded, orientation is graded, and connections are graded. So theoretically, even if you built the whole kind of structure correctly, but like off to the side instead of like on the base, you get points for all of that. So there's no need to, you can point prioritize. Like if you're like that part of the structure is way too hard to build, but the second part of the structure, which is easier, goes on top of that part, you can just have someone build that second part and just lay it on the table and get points for that, but just not get points for it being oriented on the main part of the structure. Well, that's pretty dry, but we have some actual like examples for y'all. So this one on the left is a national structure that Vidya and I did in 2018. As you can see, it's kind of like a conglomeration of random stuff and random orientations too. And so we really, really had to be good with our directions. How do you tell someone how to orient that little mini tuber, which if y'all might recognize that as a protein modeling material, how do you tell someone how to orient that? How do you tell someone how to orient that red string that's tied in the middle or those sticks that are along the edge? We had some like mechanism, right? We said like make the cup upside down. And we would talk about the cup's lateral face, and by default, the lateral face meant the middle of the lateral face. So I said, put the rubber band around the lateral face of the cup, but go 1 inch up. And so that's how you know sort of put the rubber band, etc. So you come up with your own system, your own communication mechanism. The structure on the right is something my mom must have made for the Katy Regional Tournament, if y'all have ever been. It's at Meckendorf. And this is a little bit more simple, but it kind of breaks down those components that are often tested in Write It Do It. The styrofoam, the popsicle sticks, the straws, the cups. So yeah. You can keep going. These are just more example structures. There's a pegboard that we once created to use for practice with the grid system. Yeah. I can go back so you can take a picture.
Would these be more like Division C level?
No, it actually, okay, so if you want to go back one, the one on the right, I can definitely see being Division B. The one on the left, I wouldn't want to put that in Division B. You're right, Division B structures do tend to be easier, but here's the thing, there is no really standard or pressure for proctors to make division B structures easier. Because what happens is that there is a tiebreaker. There are several tiebreakers built in, right? How far you get on the structure, and of course, how fast your builder builds it. So in that way, you could still make a really, really easy witty structure and still have a really good competition to see who can build it the fastest, which is actually what happened at State about 3 years ago. Or you could have a really, really hard structure and everyone just kind of does their best at point prioritizing. Remember, if you have a really, really hard structure, you might choose to build the parts, to tell your builder to build the parts which you know that you can write the fastest so that you can accumulate the most points. You have to prioritize and optimize a little bit. Alright? Okay, so again, we name and describe parts. I'm not going to go over this so much with y'all, but like a clothespin, we would call it the front tooth, back tooth, the middle circle. You come up with kind of your own language. If you want, like the fork has prongs. It has a base that opens towards you. It has two edges. It has a handle. We have for pipe cleaners and ropes and any type of string that you can tie. We had 3 different types of motion. We had a wrap, which is when you go and come back the same direction. We had a spiral, which is where you keep going in that same direction. And then we had like spiral up or something, like spiral up 5 times with a spacing of 1 inch between each coil. There was also twine. And so yeah, you could really, look, if you just take like a pipe cleaner and a bunch of office supplies and you just kind of deform them as much as you can and then figure out, how would I name that? Or how would I describe how we got there? That's a good way to practice for witty. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit more into our clock and plane system. And now finally is the last dry part of writing, and I get to talk about why writing is actually important. First of all, it's technical writing. So your writer gets a lot of, like STEM-oriented writing is very, very concise and very straight to the point, and that's what writing fluid is. And it's very procedural, especially if you're writing a methodology for like your lab report or a paper. That's where writing fluid comes in handy. First, let me talk to you about our clock and plane system, which Aditya and I used to use to describe location. As y'all saw in that national structure, it was kind of difficult to describe the orientation of everything, but it all boils down to this. So I have looked up a picture of a cube with the clock on it. And so we see every structure as like inside a cube. If I look at a structure from the front, then I'm looking at it from the front plane. If I look at it from the top, I'm looking at it from the top plane. If I look at it from the left, I'm looking at it from the left plane, right plane. And in each of those planes, I imagine a clock. And in that way, I can say, hey, that toothpick should be pointing towards 7 o'clock in the left plane. So Aditya knows to imagine that he is on the left side of that cube and that the toothpick points towards 7 p.m. And in that simple system, the clock and plane system, it could describe any orientation ever. Because what can happen is that instead of like the front plane and the left plane, you can also kind of say, hey, go to a plane that is halfway between the front and left plane. So like the front left plane, and then do 7 o'clock in there. So you could like literally rotate around the entire structure and then use the clock to cover any orientation you wanted to. And it's like very simple. I'd love to talk about this if y'all have any questions later. But how does this actually help? This means that as a writer, I have to be able to imagine that Aditya is building the structure and then rotating the structure to the left, or underneath, or the top, or the right. And so as a competitor, sometimes you could get up and walk around the structure when you're writing it, and other times you had to kind of sit in one place, and you couldn't leave. So you learn to rotate things in your mind, and that's actually important in organic chemistry, which is why I put an organic chemistry molecule on the right. So with chirality and chiral centers, you need to be able to distinguish, you need to be able to like, give priority to the groups in here. So like you might label this group 1, group 2, group 3. Sometimes you need to look at this molecule from the left or from underneath or from the top, but it's drawn like this. And so it's really difficult for you to understand. That wedge means that the group is coming out towards you. The dashed lines means that it's going behind the plane of the paper. So write it do gives you extremely strong spatial reasoning and helps you tell that, okay, if I was underneath the molecule, those 3 groups would be going counterclockwise. Or if I was to the left of it, they would be going like clockwise or counterclockwise or clockwise. And also, a lot of schools do this, but UT in particular does something called the spatial visualization of rotations test for every single engineer who comes to UT. And basically, it's a test with like 20 questions like this. And it's like, this complex solid is rotated in that way, just like that complex solid is rotated to what? And then you have to choose. And Write to Do It helps you actually do this in your head, whether you're a doer or a writer. So I think the second one is more complicated. So in a way, it's like you rotated this 90 degrees clockwise, and so you need to rotate the second structure 90 degrees clockwise. Or in a way, it's like I'm looking at it from the front right plane. So that means that whatever I have here, I need to look at that from the front right plane as well. So it gives you a lot of like spatial visualization skills. This one too. This is a little bit more complex of a rotation, but if you have kind of like a discerning eye, you'd be able to tell that it's been rotated clockwise in the front plane, and then clockwise in the top plane, 90 degrees both times. And so you'll be able to repeat that on the second. And that just comes with practice and doing Witty, but it's like such a good skill to have, especially if you're going to an engineering field or an allied field, because as you can see, even in chemistry, you have to be able to rotate things in your head. Okay, that's me off my soapbox. I just really like Witty. Yeah, and so another thing you can do is also just make sure that you review your writing after you practice. So if your doer can go through your writing and be like, hey, I didn't really understand what you meant by that. Or like, yeah, we got it right in the end, but I feel like there's a more clear way you could have said that. Or like, this is an ambiguous name that we've given to this part of a paperclip or something. You can go in and discuss that after each. So that's just good practice. Okay, so we will probably close up a little with some We've Got Your Number.
Yeah, so one of the other big trial eventing tests is called We've Got Your Numbers. One of the trial events will be running at the UT Invitational this fall. So the premise of We've Got Your Number is that so the proctor gives you four numbers, really two sets of four numbers, like maybe 1, 2, 3, and 4. And using those four integers, you have to make as many of the integers between 1 and 100 as you can. So I can be like 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, that's 10, so I got 10. Maybe if I multiply all of them, then I can get 24, stuff like that. And the only like operations you're allowed to use are addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and exponents. And I actually made a mistake in that note. Factorials and logarithms are only for division C. You can use exponents and division B. So We've Got Your Numbers, one of the events that's run in both division B and division C. And one of the reasons why a lot of tournaments run it is because it's easy to run. You don't have to write a huge test. All you have to do is come up with two groups of four numbers. And it also doesn't cost any money to run. Like, all you need to do is print out some papers. While in a lot of other events, you have to pay a bunch of money to get supplies. So in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about general tips that you can use with LDG1. So I'm not an expert in We've Got Your Number, but I know a little bit about it, and hopefully I can help you guys a little. So one of the things that's really cool about like an event like WGYN is that numbers like 0 and 1 are extremely useful. So every time I have a 0, you can kind of think of it as I also have a 1, because any number to the 0th power is going to be a 1, right? Or anytime I have two of the same number, I pretty much have a 1 or a 0, because 4 minus 4 is 0, 4 divided by 4 is 1. I promise I can do that. Okay, and then in the same way, you can also kind of look for patterns within the numbers. So let's say that I have one very common thing that people do in WGYN is they look at, so you always try and do, so you have four numbers, right? And let's say, I don't know what two of them are, but I know the other two are off by 1. So using those other two, or let's say that I have like 4, 4, and then any two random numbers, right? So using those two random numbers, I can make a number. And then using the 4 and 4, I can get +1, nothing, and -1. So the idea in WGYN is that you can always do minus 4 over 4, times 4 over 4, and plus 4 over 4. So by thinking of one idea, you're able to get 3 numbers. And that's a very powerful concept in WGYN. When you're so pressed for time and you have to think really fast, you want to minimize the amount of unique expressions you have to come up with so that you can just find variations on things you've already done. That saves you a lot of time and effort. Another interesting thing that you can do is also use factorials to your advantage. So for those of you who don't remember, factorials are where you have, like, if I say 3 factorial, that means 3 times 2 times 1, all multiplied together. So if I say like 5 factorial, that's 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And you can also think of it as 5 times 4 times 3 factorial. So factorials are a really useful way of getting big numbers that are highly divisible by other numbers, which might not sound very useful, but sometimes in WGYN you're faced with the problem of like, I need to get a number like 96, or I need to get a number like 48, but I have a bunch of weird like odd numbers or something like that. So you can also combine factorials together. So you can do something called double factorial. So let's say I have 3 factorial, which I know is 6. So you can say 3 factorial, and you put parentheses around it, and then you do another factorial. So then that 3 factorial becomes 6 factorial, which is 720. And 720 is a highly divisible number, so I can divide it by like 9, I can divide it by 8 or something, or divide it by 10 or something, and I get 72 or like 90 or something like that, right? And those are very useful numbers for me, because then I can be like, oh, 90 minus 8, okay, that's 82. Okay, I got 82 or something like that, right? So there's a lot of these like number sense tricks or like just really good math intuition. And that's why WGYN is such a popular event among people. Even though it's been a trial event for as long as I can remember, it's always one of the most popular trial events. And a lot of the times, more people compete in We've Got Your Number than other like national level events, even at the UT Invitational. So in a way, it is a very competitive event. But it's also an event where if you practice, then you're guaranteed to get very good, because all it comes down to is finding the right patterns, like finding that pattern of minus 1, plus 0, plus 1. That's something you just have to get used to. Or finding all the tricks where like, oh, every time I have a 5 minus 4, I'm just going to group those together and treat it like I also have a 1. That's something that you have to get used to by practicing. So if you want to get good in an event like WGYN, you just have to practice a lot. At the team that Ashish and I were on, we had 2 really, really smart people on it. And they were really good at math, but the reason that they were good at We've Got Your Number was just because they practiced a lot. Like during orchestra rehearsals, I would give my friend like 4 numbers, and we would be like on our stand while other sections were like being talked to. We would be like, okay, this is how we can get 72, this is how we can get 68, this is how we can get 24, stuff like that. So you just gotta practice as much as you can. And that's the general overarching theme with these inquiry events. A lot of people like to think, oh, these aren't like real science, how am I even supposed to study for them? But you just have to practice a lot, as Ashish was saying for Ready to Do It. And the same goes for every single other one. There's a lot of like random strategy and nuances in WGYN, but I don't know them super well since I've never competed in it. If you guys have any general questions, Ashish and I have a lot of experience between the two of us with inquiry events, but it's hard to kind of put that stuff in a slide. So feel free to ask us any questions, and hopefully we can help you out.
Yeah. And then, again, we're partners on Right to Do It for 3 years, but I think we have total like 5 years of experience, and also on Science Word for senior year. So if y'all have any questions, just let us know.
And I also did picture this when I was at Beckendorf, and the two of us did experimental design a couple of times as well. Okay. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, we can. Oh yeah, what's up?
Remind the code that this has like multiple sheets of paper with like only 1 or 2 problems per.
Oh yeah, so Toby's, so like how it was at the previous competition, so this time it's being written using Toby's software. Have you heard of it? Yeah, the website. Yeah, so it's that exact same thing. Yeah, so it's that exact same format. That's how the test was made. So you can expect it to be exactly like that. Does that answer your question?
Okay, and I think the rules this year say that you have to give, like, the certain tables, correct? Like,
Yeah, like the frequency charts and stuff.
And
Yeah, so I believe that since it's made using that website, at the beginning of the test, it has all those frequency tables and all that stuff. Truthfully, I'm not extremely experienced with Codebusters. I've never competed in it, and it became an event after I joined college. But okay, I think Woody's the best event. But yeah, does that answer your question? Okay, awesome. Okay, we have some slides about experimental design, and as always, if you have any questions, just feel free to stop us. We're happy to answer any of them. Oh yeah. Oh, and we can also do some practice for WGY if you have time, but it's not that important right now.
Okay, so EX design. If y'all were in the I forget which thing I was presenting on. I kind of got like kind of annoyed because EX design. I don't like the fact that they try to fit 50 minutes. In 50 minutes, they try to fit an entire scientific experiment and a report. I think it's a little tough, but I mean that presents its own challenges and its own ways for you to kind of develop your scientific abilities. First of all, you need to really understand the scientific method. Um, and that means a lot more than just like kind of the middle school, hypothesis, problem hypothesis, experiment, conclusion, whatever. We also introduce new concepts like the standard of comparison. They really emphasize controls, so I know they do teach that in middle school. They talk a lot about experimental error and also like analysis of data and some rudimentary statistics, especially in Division C. So students need to be flexible with many different types of experimental prompts. So you could have something more traditional, like a sandpaper ramp. See how fast the car rolls down in it, and see how friction affects the end speed of the car. Or you could have something more unconventional, like psychology. You want to give an example of one of the psychology prompts that has happened before?
Yeah, of course. So, are any of you guys familiar with something called the Weber-Fechner law or the Weber's law in psychology? So the idea is, let's say that I'm holding two weights. How how do I know that those two weights are different, right? So if they're very close together, okay, one of them is 100 grams and the other is 101 grams. Now maybe pretty hard for me to tell which one is which, right? But if one of them is 100 and the other is like 1,000, that's obvious, right? Now the idea behind the law is that whether you're able to distinguish between the two weights or two stimuli in general, is that it's dependent on the proportion of like the stimulus strength. Now I know I kind of worded that a little bit weirdly, so let me explain right now. So let's say I have like a 10 gram weight and an 11 gram weight. So the difference between them is 10%, right? Because 1 gram divided by 10 is 10%. Now let's say that's how much I can distinguish them by. And in terms of like subtraction, that's a difference of 1 gram. But in terms of percentage, that's 10%. Now let's say I scale that up to 100 grams. So I got a 100 gram weight, and now I have a 101 gram weight. So the difference is still the same, but as a percentage, it's 1% instead of 10%. So now it's a lot harder for me to distinguish between the two weights. But if I were to make that other one the same fraction, if I made it 100 and 110, then I would probably be able to distinguish it. So the idea behind that law is that the proportion is what matters. So that was actually an experiment that I got while I was a competitor at the UT Invitational. So it's time to flat circle, I guess. But anyways, so yeah, what we were given is instead of being given weights or anything, the proctor just gave us like unlimited paper and unlimited rulers. So the idea behind it is that so what we ended up doing is drawing a bunch of circles. And we were like, oh, you have to tell the area between them. And we probably did a terrible job. But the best way to do it would have been to like, okay, you have all this paper, just draw a bunch of lines. Like this one is 1 centimeter, this one is 1.1 centimeters. And then the idea behind these psychology experiments is that you test them on your partners. And that's part of the experiment. And that's something that's really unique because if you have a normal chemistry experiment, you're mixing chemicals together or whatever. If you have like a physics experiment, you're rolling a car down a ramp or something. But in these psychology experiments, you're testing it on one of your group members. And the reason I say bring that up is because that's one group member that's being tested on instead of writing something down. So whenever you're practicing for this, you have to keep that in mind, and that you're gonna have to be extra fast. You're gonna have to be extra concise in how you word everything and stuff like that.
Yeah. So basically, because event prompts can get as complicated as that, they can go from like the toy car down a ramp all the way up to Weber's law. It A good exercise to do, and what we found that was really helpful for our team was to practice giving each other prompts and then responding to those prompts with a plan to conduct the experiment and at least a problem and a hypothesis thought up within 5 minutes. Because it takes so long to write a well thought out, fleshed out kind of scientific proposal, scientific report, that you need all the time you can get to do that. So that 5 minute drill is actually a really good way to practice for EX design, especially because I mean, it's not the best use of your time to do like 50-minute practices unless you're like really close to the tournament anyway. So it's always good to go in with a clear plan of who is doing each part. All three people should not be working on one part at a time. We have always found this to be the best way to do it. And I believe that all of the people who are successful or who are more often successful at state and nationals usually split it up, as in like you are the hypothesis person, you are the conclusion person, and sometimes you can split it up in a kind of an intelligent way. So it might not just be you're the first third of the rubric, you're the second third of the rubric, you're the last part of the rubric. Sometimes what we've done is say like, oh, if you're on hypothesis, you're also on conclusion, because conclusion calls back to the hypothesis. And if you're on data, you're on analysis. Yeah.
Is this method recommended just for experimental design or for all of the study events?
Oh, what do you mean by all of this idea?
Like splitting up tests.
Oh, splitting up tests, you mean, yeah. I would say splitting up tests is a very, very good practice in general, especially if you're very confident that your partner has like a similar amount of knowledge as you, or at least a similar amount of knowledge but in different areas of the event. If you all could split it up, then it kind of doubles your efficiency. But if one partner in a regular study event is way more, the second partner just got on the event and just got thrown onto it at the last minute, then it can be better to work through the test together. Did that answer your question? Okay. So anyway, yeah. So the data person might be doing analysis. The experimental errors person might be the one who wrote the variables because you can see what they were trying to control in the first place. The procedure person might also be the materials person because that way the materials, they can make sure that all the materials mentioned were mentioned in the procedure, which I believe is actually a point on the rubric. That way someone doesn't have to read both things to make sure.
One small thing to keep in mind is over the past couple of years they changed the event a lot, and now they have it split up into two parts, right? So you have to make sure when you divide up the parts like that during each part everybody is doing something. So you shouldn't have it so that two people are really busy in the first part and then the third person is only really busy in the second part or something. You really have to be smart about that. But that's something that depends on every group and it's something that you guys should figure out depending on whatever your strengths are as a team.
That's true about the kids who make up their data.
Yeah, that'd be a good
And
thing.
it does actually have it in bold this year, so it's new. It says each team not collecting data by conducting the experiment on site will have their final score multiplied by 0.25.
Correct. So that's a tier. So what'll happen is that like even if you completed a stellar lab report, if they don't feel that you actually conducted the experiment, and honestly I don't blame you because there's only 50 minutes given, and so we as former competitors and people on our team have been known to conduct like one trial of each level of the independent variable and then come up with the other two trials because there's just no time. But at this stage, it is really important for you to at least be seen going through the motions to collect your data so that you are not disqualified. That is one thing that the national proctors, the people who write these rules, feel extremely strongly about. That despite they're only giving you 50 minutes, they really want to see you do the experiment. And if you do think about it, that is what they were going for with the spirit of the event. They weren't testing if you could regurgitate a rubric that you've kind of practiced memorizing. They were trying to see if you could have like a creative mind and put things together on the spot to come up with a coherent scientific question that you answer as a team. Anyone have any questions about that? Thank you for bringing that up again. Okay, so here's some sample prompts that we've written in the past. Again, questions. There are some prompts that can be easy or some prompts that are just not prompts at all. They're just lists of materials, and they say, go for it, create an experiment. Other times, they give you some background information. They say, your experiment needs to be on this. And these are very dangerous because if you end up deviating from the purpose or from the intent of the prompt, you end up in territory where you could be off topic, and that actually could also tier your paper and cause you to be scored below everybody else. So this is like a chromatography chamber thing where, you can examine any aspect of chromatography using the materials below. So you can see how far does, a Sharpie migrate on the chromatography paper, blah, 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 blah. And the background information tries to give people enough to work with, even if they're not super familiar with chromatography. But the thing is, there are probably, if nobody on your team knew anything about chromatography, you would kind of be a little bit out of luck here. Or it would take you a long time to kind of figure out where they were going with this, and you would run out of time to write your report. Because of that, we actually do suggest that there is in creating these 3-person teams, still 3-person, right? In creating these 3-person teams, you have a good balance of skill sets. Maybe someone who's really, really good at chemistry, someone who's really good at physics. Those tend to be kind of essential. It can be one person too if someone's good at both of those. Biology, people are usually less able to test biology experiments. The one time I did do a lab which involved like yeast and like growing the yeast and to see like how much of the gas they produce and stuff, that's a little bit biology oriented. Like, someone who knows chemistry and physics in high school, preferably someone who's taken the upper level courses of those, so like honors physics or whatever. Though like that's not a requirement. So I would just say like the more senior people on your team would always be the better fit for experimental design, just because they're more comfortable with the broader variety of topics. Does anyone have any questions about this? Cool. And then here's a fluid and energy conservation prompt, which is also a little bit on the harder side, but there is an equation that is provided, and so you could possibly test the relationship between two of those variables pretty well. And honestly, one question that also arises if you're saying like, oh, we should be doing the data collection like legitimately and all of that is that if you don't get a relationship that you expected to get, what do you do? And I would say at that point, just really elaborate on your possible sources of experimental error and like where your procedure went wrong and stuff, because that is still true experimental design and is in keeping with the spirit of the event. So don't worry too much about getting an experiment that works perfectly. But at the same time, if what you tested just wasn't logical and wasn't really testing of the this fluid equation, then you wouldn't get too many points for that.
This is an example of a psychology prompt. So you can see like one of the advantages of psychology prompts from an event supervisor perspective is that the materials are very simple and the setup is very simple and it's very cheap. So over the recent years, there's been a really big increase in the amount of psychology prompts that event supervisors have started to give, and for the reasons I was saying. So that's why when I was doing experimental design towards the end of my high school career, we really started practicing this a little bit more. So as you can see, like this is a pretty tough lab. I'm just like reading through it and I see a bunch of big words that I don't really want to think about right now. And the materials are very simple. So that's why these types of labs are becoming more and more common, and it's a different type of experiment that your students have to be prepared for.
Okay. So just some general strategies for experiential design is really, really play the expert in the sections that allow you to play the expert, such as the hypothesis. You really want a rationale in the hypothesis with that little point in the rubric that says, come up with the reasoning why. You really want that to show your mastery of the topic. And it should not be like a regurgitation of the prompt or something that is like self-evident, like, oh, the car is gonna have a higher end speed when you put it down the ramp because it's gonna make it down the ramp faster. That doesn't really answer any questions or show any scientific theory. And expand on that same theory in the conclusion. So again, the hypothesis is like very linked to the conclusion. Don't use vague human error type responses in experimental error. So never write human error and experimental error. I would always specify like the maybe when you were releasing the car, you might have accidentally like pushed it a little bit instead of just letting go. And then you specify the direction of the error. You say, if someone pushed it, then it would have had a higher than expected end speed. So to be as specific as possible with these experimental errors shows that you're a more rigorous thinker, and that will help break ties as well, and like add to the thoroughness of your report. So let one designated person do the experiment. Usually, though, with these psychology experiments, it usually takes a couple of people experimenting on each other, and do not risk making up data. So we actually do officially recommend that y'all do not risk that at all. Even before it was a bolded thing in the rules, we just really emphasize it because proctors have always had the power to say like if you weren't doing it in what they see as the spirit of the event, they could just dock you points wise. And then the 5-minute drills we talked about. So kind of come up with the prompt, kind of see what you can do with it, and see if you can come up with several different coherent experiments within 5 minutes with 3 people who have expertise in different areas. Hopefully that provides like different angles with which to see the prompt and how to approach it. And go ahead and make yourself a template. It won't be easy to follow all the time, but for the most part, you can be like, insert into your if-then statement, your hypothesis, your rationale, your experimental error, just things to make your report look professional, even though you don't have a lot of time to actually write it up during the actual competition. Yeah. Okay, and I think that is it for inquiry. So do y'all have any last-minute questions before we break eventually for the panel? Y'all have like a 5-10 minute break before that, and then we'll just wrap up. Okay. So y'all are free to ask us at any time if y'all have any questions, especially about write a do it science word and picture this, which we have the most experience with. But yeah, thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna get smarter.
Oh, okay. I'll try my best. I don't know that much about ping pong parachute though. Sorry. So you're asking what part of the bottle is this?
Yeah.
That was amazing. Did you see my comments on the live stream? No, I didn't. I'm sorry, Mike. You better be. Okay, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this is like, a soda bottle? This is the like top of the soda bottle, and I think this is the bottom of the soda bottle, and the top of the bottle. I think so. I can't really explain this in a lot of detail though. I don't know that much about this event, and I don't want to tell you the wrong information. But do you remember the Saudi.org forum that we mentioned in some of the other presentations? I really recommend asking about this on the forums. This is a really good question, and I think that you could get an answer from people who know a lot more about this than I do. Does that help you?
Yeah, and what is this? Is this like the
Oh, I think this is a part of the launcher, I think.
Okay, yeah, that.
I think so.
I know what you're.
I think so. I'm truthfully not very experienced with ping pong parachute. So I don't want to tell you anything that's evil.
Okay, that's all right. Thanks.
Of course, no problem. Come on.